The rise of the cafe. Mary always knew that her destiny was intertwined with coffee. As a child, she spent her vacations at her grandfather Joaquim's farm, a small coffee producer in Minas Gerais, Brazil. Joaquim was a simple man but enthusiastic about what he did. He taught his granddaughter everything about the coffee cultivation process, from planting to harvesting and roasting the beans. Mary was fascinated by her grandfather's stories about how coffee was not just a beverage but a tradition, a culture that united people from different parts of the world. This passion for coffee followed Mary throughout her life. Even after moving to São Paulo to study, she never forgot her grandfather's lessons. She worked in various jobs to support herself, but her dream was always to open her own cafe. She wanted to create a space where people could experience the true flavor of Brazilian coffee, grown with care and respect for the land. After years of meticulous planning, rigorous saving, and learning about the cafe market, Mary finally realized her dream. She chose a historic and charming neighborhood in São Paulo to open the doors of Farmhouse Cafe. The name was a tribute to her grandfather's farm, where it all began. The location of Farmhouse Cafe could not have been more perfect. The neighborhood was known for its welcoming atmosphere, with cobblestone streets, old mansions, and a community that valued local commerce. Mary knew that here she could create the environment she always dreamed of, a place where people felt at home, surrounded by good conversations and the comforting aroma of fresh coffee. From the beginning, Farmhouse Cafe stood out for the quality of its products and its unique ambience. Mary invested in the decor, which combined rustic wooden furniture with elements that reminded her of her grandfather's farm. Pictures on the walls showed the coffee cultivation process, from planting to roasting, and typical plants from the countryside adorned the corners of the room. In addition to the decor, the menu at Farmhouse Cafe was carefully crafted. Mary insisted on using only high-quality beans, many of them sourced from small producers like her grandfather. The options ranged from traditional brewed coffee to more sophisticated drinks like cappuccinos and espressos prepared with precision. Mary was also a constant presence in the cafe, welcoming customers with a warm smile and a fresh cup of coffee. She knew many of her customers by name and knew exactly how they liked their coffee. This personal touch transformed Farmhouse Cafe into a true meeting point for neighborhood residents. People came not just for the coffee, but for the experience of being in a place that conveyed comfort, tradition, and a deep passion for what she did. In no time, Farmhouse Cafe became one of the most popular spots in the area. Loyal customers recommended the cafe to friends and family, and word of mouth quickly made the business thrive. For Mary, seeing her dream come true was a reward for all the years of effort and dedication. Farmhouse Cafe was not just a business. It was an extension of her family history, a tribute to her grandfather Joaquim's legacy, who taught her to love coffee and people. #hiring Beatrice. As Farmhouse Cafe continued to thrive, Mary began to feel the weight of growing responsibilities on her shoulders. She had always been a perfectionist, personally overseeing every detail, from selecting the beans to preparing the drinks and serving the customers. However, with the constant increase in customer flow, it became clear that she needed help to maintain the level of quality and attention for which her cafe had become known. It was in this context that Mary decided to search for a new barista for her team. For her, the choice could not be made lightly. Farmhouse Cafe was not just a business. It was an extension of her identity and her family heritage. Therefore, she needed to find someone who shared the same passion for coffee and understood the importance of creating a unique experience for customers. After interviewing several candidates, Mary met Beatrice, a 24-year-old young woman who had moved to São Paulo in search of better opportunities. Originally from a small town in the countryside, Beatrice came from a humble family but had always had a great interest in cooking, especially in coffee. During the interview, Mary was immediately impressed by Beatrice's enthusiasm and knowledge about the world of coffee. She was not just a barista with practical experience. She was a true enthusiast, passionate about exploring new flavors and techniques. Beatrice had graduated from a barista course in São Paulo, where she learned not only to prepare classic drinks but also the art of creating new combinations that could surprise and delight customers. Throughout her career, she worked in various cafes across the city, gaining experience and refining her skills. When Mary met her, she realized that she had found the right person to help take Farmhouse Cafe to a new level. In addition to her technical skills, what really won Mary over was Beatrice's attitude. She was a determined, dedicated, and extremely friendly young woman. From the start, Beatrice showed a great willingness to learn and integrate into the culture of Farmhouse Cafe. She understood the importance of every detail, from how the coffee was served to the interaction with customers, and was always willing to go the extra mile to ensure that everyone who entered the cafe had a memorable experience. With Beatrice's arrival, Mary began to delegate some tasks, allowing her to focus on other areas of the business, such as developing new products and strengthening relationships with suppliers. Beatrice quickly took on important responsibilities, such as closing the cash register and managing the inventory, tasks that Mary trusted only to someone she had complete confidence in. Beatrice's presence at Farmhouse Cafe brought a new energy to the environment. She was attentive to details, creative in developing new recipes, and had a special talent for captivating customers with her friendliness. Over time, many regulars began to specifically request drinks prepared by Beatrice, praising her talent and the attention she gave to each cup of coffee. For Mary, hiring Beatrice was one of the best investments she could have made. It not only relieved her workload but also brought new dynamism to the cafe, contributing to the continued success of Farmhouse Cafe. With Beatrice by her side, Mary felt that her dream was in good hands, and together, they began writing a new chapter in the cafe's history. The first suspicions. With the success of Farmhouse Cafe growing each day, Mary was pleased with the direction her business was taking. However, as a dedicated entrepreneur, she always kept a close eye on the finances and operational details of the cafe. It was during one of these routine reviews that Mary began to notice something that caused her concern. Sales were high, the flow of customers was constant, but the profits did not reflect this growth. Sometimes, at the end of the day, the cash register showed a smaller amount than expected. Initially, Mary thought it could be a calculation error, something simple like incorrect change or an unrecorded expense. However, as the days went by, the discrepancy in the cash register continued, and the amounts, although small, began to add up. These small discrepancies started to bother Mary. She had always been extremely organized and careful with finances, and any difference, no matter how small, needed to be justified. She decided to review the sales records, expenses, and cash entries with more attention. Despite all the effort, she couldn't find a logical explanation for the differences. It was then that a disturbing thought began to surface in her mind. Beatrice, the young barista in whom she had placed so much trust, was the only other person with access to the cash register. The idea that Beatrice could be involved in something illicit seemed absurd, but the evidence seemed to point in that direction. These suspicions began to torment Mary, leaving her in a constant state of doubt and apprehension. She didn't want to believe that someone as dedicated as Beatrice could be stealing. However, the unanswered questions continued to haunt her, and Mary knew she needed to discover the truth. The growing suspicion. As the discrepancies in the cash register continued to occur, Mary's unease turned into growing suspicion. She had always prided herself on her ability to judge people's character, and Beatrice seemed to be an honest, dedicated young woman. However, the numbers didn't lie, and Mary couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As the days went by, Mary began to observe Beatrice more critically. Small details that had previously gone unnoticed now took on greater significance. She noticed how Beatrice handled the money, her posture when closing the cash register, and even her interactions with customers. Mary tried to convince herself that she was overreacting, but the doubt persisted, gnawing away at the trust she had once placed in her employee. In an effort to find answers, Mary decided to take drastic measures. She discreetly installed security cameras in the cafe. Until then, she had never felt the need to monitor the environment so closely, trusting in the camaraderie she had cultivated. However, the circumstances demanded a more rigorous approach, and the cameras were the only way to discover what was really happening. Meanwhile, the relationship between Mary and Beatrice began to change. Beatrice noticed that her boss was more distant, more reserved. The conversations, once relaxed and friendly, became formal and brief. Mary, on the other hand, felt guilty for suspecting someone she trusted so much, but the evidence, or the lack of explanations, spoke louder. Mary's suspicion reached its peak. She knew she needed concrete proof before confronting Beatrice, but each day that passed without a clear answer increased her inner torment. Waiting for the truth. After installing the security cameras, Mary hoped that the truth would finally come to light. The anxiety she felt every day when closing Farmhouse Cafe was almost unbearable. With each new recording she watched, her hope of finding an explanation for the discrepancies in the cash register grew, but it was also accompanied by a paralyzing fear. What if Beatrice was indeed stealing? What would she do? Mary spent every night poring over the recordings, alone in her small office at the back of the cafe. The computer screen had become a mirror of the tension she was living. Minute by minute, she analyzed every movement of Beatrice, every interaction with customers, every time the young barista approached the cash register. However, to her simultaneous frustration and relief, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Beatrice continued to perform her job with the same dedication as always. She smiled at customers, carefully prepared orders, and meticulously closed the cafe at the end of the day. There was nothing in the recordings to suggest that Beatrice was involved in any suspicious activity. But then, why did the cash register continue to show discrepancies? This question tormented Mary. As the days passed, the lack of answers began to take a toll on Mary's mental and emotional health. She found herself trapped in a vicious cycle of doubt and uncertainty. On one hand, she didn't want to believe that Beatrice could be involved in something wrong. On the other hand, she couldn't ignore the facts. The suspicion, though without concrete proof, had already created an invisible barrier between the two. Beatrice, in turn, also noticed the change in Mary's behavior. The boss, who had once been so close and friendly, now seemed distant, almost cold. Beatrice couldn't understand the reason for this change, but it began to affect her own emotional state. She wondered if she had done something wrong, if she had made a mistake that Mary had not mentioned. The tension between the two became palpable, creating a heavy and uncomfortable work environment. Meanwhile, Mary continued to search for answers on other fronts. She rechecked the sales records, verified every expense, and even consulted the accountant to ensure that she had not made a mistake. Everything seemed in order, except for the fact that the cash register did not match the recorded sales. The situation was reaching an unsustainable point. Mary knew that she couldn't continue like this for much longer. The lack of sleep and stress began to affect her performance at work and her relationship with customers. She avoided looking Beatrice in the eye, fearing what she might see or not see. The need for action was clear, but Mary still hesitated to confront Beatrice directly without concrete proof. The weight for the truth had become too heavy a burden for Mary to carry alone. She found herself at a crossroads, where she needed to decide whether to continue monitoring in the hope of finding something on the recordings or finally confront Beatrice and try to resolve the mystery. Each option carried its own risks and possible consequences, and Mary felt that time was running out for her to make a decision. The shocking discovery, the tension at Farmhouse Cafe, reached a critical point when, after weeks of surveillance and analysis without conclusive results, Mary found herself on the brink of exhaustion. She was about to make a difficult decision: confront Beatrice without concrete proof or try to ignore the discrepancies in the cash register, risking the continuity of her business. However, fate had different plans. One afternoon, while organizing some old documents in the office, Mary found a pile of papers she hadn't seen in months. Among them was a letter from a medical clinic. The letter was addressed to Beatrice and appeared to have been left there by mistake. Mary hesitated to open it, aware that she would be invading her employees' privacy. But curiosity and the need to understand what was happening got the better of her. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope and began to read. The words she found inside left her stunned. The letter confirmed that Beatrice was facing a serious health problem and urgently needed expensive and prolonged treatment. The document detailed the nature of the treatment and the costs involved, amounts that Mary knew were out of reach for someone with Beatrice's salary. Reading the letter left Mary in a state of shock. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place in a painful way. The young woman who always seemed so cheerful and dedicated was actually carrying a huge burden without sharing it with anyone. Beatrice, whom Mary had begun to suspect, was silently fighting a serious illness while trying to keep up appearances and maintain her job. Mary felt a wave of conflicting emotions. On one hand, she felt deeply guilty for doubting Beatrice and for monitoring her actions so intensely. On the other hand, her heart filled with compassion for the young woman who, despite the difficulties, continued to work with dedication and without complaints. The discovery made Mary realize how little she knew about her employee's personal life, someone she considered almost a friend. However, one question still remained unanswered. Why was the cash register always short? Mary began to suspect that Beatrice, in her desperation to pay for treatment, might have taken small amounts, hoping to repay them later. This idea saddened her deeply because she knew that Beatrice must have felt cornered and without alternatives. With a heavy heart, Mary decided that she needed to talk to Beatrice as soon as possible. The truth about the young woman's health situation not only explained many things but also completely changed the way Mary viewed the problem. She knew she could no longer continue with her suspicions and needed to find a way to help Beatrice, both with the treatment and the financial issues. The letter Mary found was a turning point in the story. What seemed to be a simple cash register problem turned out to be a life-and-death matter for Beatrice. The businesswoman, who until then had been focused on protecting her business, now faced a situation that required much more than administrative measures. It was necessary to act with the heart, not just with reason. With the letter still in hand, Mary sat down for a moment to process everything. She knew that confronting Beatrice wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that more than ever, it was necessary. The discovery had shaken her convictions but also moved her to act in a more humane and compassionate way. Now, the next step would be crucial for both of them. ##### the confrontation and the revelation. With a heavy heart and a mind filled with a storm of emotions, Mary knew she could no longer postpone the confrontation with Beatrice. The discovery of the letter had changed everything, and it was essential for them to talk openly. At the end of the day, when the cafe was already empty and silence filled the air, Mary called Beatrice for a private conversation in her office. Beatrice entered the room with an apprehensive expression, clearly sensing the seriousness of the situation. Mary, for her part, tried to find the right words to start the conversation. She began by mentioning the discrepancies in the cash register, something that had been tormenting her for weeks. She spoke about how she had noticed small amounts disappearing and how it had made her suspect something was wrong. Upon hearing this, Beatrice was visibly shaken. Her eyes filled with tears, and she began to tremble slightly. Before Mary could continue, Beatrice, with a trembling voice interrupted by sobs, confessed that she had taken small amounts from the cash register. She explained that she was desperate to pay for her medical treatment and saw no other option but to take the money, intending to return every cent as soon as she could. Mary, who had maintained her composure until then, felt a pang of pain seeing Beatrice's emotional state. She realized that the young woman was completely overwhelmed by the situation and that the fear of losing her job, coupled with the shame of asking for help, had led her to make a wrong decision. Mary then mentioned the letter she had found, explaining that she now understood the reason behind Beatrice's actions. The revelation brought immediate relief to both of them. Beatrice, though ashamed of her actions, felt a weight lift off her shoulders when she realized that Mary wasn't there to judge her but to understand and help. Mary, in turn, saw in Beatrice's vulnerability an opportunity to show empathy and offer the support the young woman so desperately needed. This conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. What could have been a harsh and final confrontation turned into a moment of connection and understanding that would unite them even more. Mary's decision. After Beatrice's revelation about her situation, Mary found herself faced with a difficult choice. The initial distrust and suspicions that had tormented her for weeks had dissipated, giving way to a deeper understanding of the circumstances that had led Beatrice to act the way she did. Now, more than ever, Mary knew that her decision would be crucial not only for the young barista's future, but also for the very essence of Farmhouse Cafe. Mary, known for her sense of justice and compassion, reflected on everything that had happened. She could simply dismiss Beatrice, considering the act as an irreparable breach of trust. This would be an easy decision, based on traditional business norms, but Mary knew that the situation required more than an immediate and punitive response. She needed to act with empathy and humanity, qualities that had always guided her management. After a few moments of reflection, Mary made a decision that would change the course of events. Instead of punishing Beatrice, she chose to extend a helping hand and offer assistance. Looking directly into the young woman's eyes, Mary said she understood the desperation that had led her to take the money, and that instead of judging her, she wanted to help her through this difficult phase. Mary decided that Farmhouse Cafe would cover Beatrice's medical expenses, allowing her to start the treatment without the burden of debt. Additionally, she assured Beatrice that her job was secure and that trust between them could be rebuilt, as long as there was honesty and transparency from that moment on. Beatrice, moved, could hardly believe Mary's generosity. The young woman, who had prepared herself for the worst, now saw a light at the end of the tunnel. This decision was not just an act of kindness, but also an affirmation of the values that Mary held dear. She knew that leading a business was more than just managing finances and operations. It was also about taking care of the people around you. By choosing the path of compassion, Mary not only helped Beatrice overcome a difficult phase, but also strengthened the spirit of solidarity that had always defined Farmhouse Cafe. ###the impact on the community and the business. Mary's decision to support Beatrice in a time of great need quickly spread throughout the community, generating a wave of solidarity and admiration. Farmhouse Cafe, which was already known for its cozy atmosphere and quality coffee, now became a symbol of compassion and humanity. Mary's attitude resonated deeply with the neighborhood residents, many of whom identified with a story of overcoming and mutual help. Customers at Farmhouse Cafe were moved to learn that Mary had chosen to support Beatrice, covering her medical expenses and ensuring her job. For many, this action reinforced the feeling that the cafe was not just a place to have a good cup of coffee, but also a space where human values were prioritized above all else. As a result, the cafe began to attract even more patrons, who felt inspired by the story and wanted to contribute to the success of a business that made a difference in people's lives. The news spread quickly, not only among regular customers but also throughout the local community. Farmhouse Cafe's social media pages were flooded with messages of support and praise for Mary's stance. Many shared their own stories of hardship and overcoming, creating an even stronger sense of community around the cafe. The story of Mary and Beatrice became an example for other businesses in the area, inspiring other entrepreneurs to adopt more humane and supportive practices in their own companies. In addition to the emotional and social impact, Mary's decision also brought tangible benefits to the business. The increase in clientele and the reinforced loyalty of regular customers resulted in a growth in sales, which allowed Mary to continue investing in the quality of the products and the well-being of her team. Farmhouse Cafe not only prospered financially but also solidified its reputation as a place where people were treated with respect and dignity, regardless of the circumstances. In the end, the story of Mary and Beatrice was not just a lesson in compassion and forgiveness, but also a powerful demonstration of how positive and humanitarian actions can have a profound impact both on business and the community. Farmhouse Cafe continued to flourish, now as a beacon of hope and kindness for all who passed through its doors. ###### Beatrice's journey to recovery. With the support of Mary and the community, Beatrice began her journey to recovery. Knowing that she was no longer alone and could count on the help of those around her, the young barista faced the medical treatment with a renewed sense of hope. The difficulties that once seemed insurmountable now became more manageable, thanks to the emotional and financial support that Mary had offered. In the first months of treatment, Beatrice had to reduce her work hours at Farmhouse Cafe to focus on her health. Mary, always understanding, adjusted Beatrice's schedule so she could balance work with treatment sessions and the rest needed for her recovery. To cover the gaps, Mary hired a temporary employee but made it clear that Beatrice remained a fundamental part of the team. During this period, Beatrice was surprised by the care and solidarity she received, not only from Mary but also from the cafe's customers. Many, upon learning of her situation, began to leave messages of support and even small gifts, showing how much they cared. This outpouring of affection gave Beatrice the strength to keep going, even on the most difficult days. As the treatment progressed, Beatrice began to regain her energy and drive. Although the road to full recovery was long, she felt increasingly optimistic and grateful for having such a strong support network. Gradually, she began to resume her responsibilities at Farmhouse Cafe, bringing with her new ideas and a renewed desire to contribute to the business's success. The experience transformed Beatrice in profound ways. She not only overcame a serious health crisis but also learned valuable lessons about the importance of asking for help and trusting the people around her. Her relationship with Mary, which was already based on respect and admiration, became even stronger, strengthened by compassion and mutual support. In the end, Beatrice's journey to recovery was not just about overcoming a battle against illness, but also about finding strength in the community and the relationships she built along the way. She emerged from this experience stronger and more determined, ready to face life's challenges with courage and gratitude. Farmhouse Cafe, in turn, continued to be a place where the values of solidarity and mutual support were lived out every day.